Most people assume their life is shaped by major events. Opportunities gained, relationships lost, successes earned, failures endured. But the longer you pay attention, the clearer it becomes that the direction of your life is determined far less by dramatic moments and far more by a quiet skill almost no one is taught. The ability to pay attention to reality as it is, not as you wish it to be. This sounds simple, almost too simple, but it isn't. In fact, it is one of the hardest skills to develop because it requires confronting the parts of your life you consistently avoid. It requires noticing the patterns you repeat, the excuses you rely on, the tendencies you defend, and the habits you default to when you feel stressed or uncertain. Most people don't lack intelligence or potential. They lack awareness of the quiet decisions they make every day that slowly shape their outcomes. You begin to see this when you stop explaining your problems and start observing them. Instead of saying you're unmotivated, you track how you spend your time and discover you avoid difficult tasks the moment discomfort appears. Instead of claiming you're unlucky with relationships, you examine your behaviors honestly and recognize the ways you either close yourself off or cling too tightly. Instead of assuming you're overwhelmed by life, you notice how disorganized your mind becomes when you never pause long enough to evaluate your priorities. Paying attention to reality without distortion, defense, or self-deception is the beginning of clarity. And clarity is what makes change possible. When you look closely, you realize that most of your pain doesn't come from events themselves, but from your resistance to what those events reveal about you. You're not stressed because life is chaotic. You're stressed because you avoid setting boundaries. You're not confused about what you want. You're afraid of admitting it because it would require changing the way you live. You're not behind in life. You're unfocused, scattered, caught between intentions and habits. And you begin to understand that improving your life isn't about forcing massive transformations, but about aligning your actions with the truths you already know, but rarely acknowledge. Awareness doesn't solve everything, but it removes the fog that keeps you repeating the same mistakes. Once you see a pattern clearly, you can't unsee it. You can pretend it isn't there, but pretending comes with consequences. You carry unnecessary emotional weight. You feel trapped by choices you never consciously made, and you wake up wondering why life feels repetitive. Paying attention interrupts this cycle because it reveals where your energy is leaking, where your mind is lying to you, and where your behavior contradicts your goals. You recognize how often you choose convenience over growth, comfort over progress, and distraction over presence. You start to see that discipline is not about forcing yourself. It is about removing the invisible frictions that sabotage you. When you understand your patterns, discipline becomes designing your environment, structuring your time, clarifying your intentions, and eliminating the sources of confusion that make life harder than it needs to be. The deeper truth is that attention is the foundation of self-honesty, and self-honesty is the foundation of change. Without it, you live reactively, drifting toward whatever is easiest, familiar, or immediately rewarding. With it, you begin living deliberately, choosing actions aligned with who you want to become, rather than who you have been by default. Most people think they need more motivation, but they really need more awareness of the subtle ways they undermine themselves. Motivation fades. Awareness compounds. Once you see the connection between your choices and their outcomes, you stop waiting for inspiration and start practicing responsibility. Not as a burden, but as a form of self-respect. Responsibility is not blame. It is the recognition that your life is shaped by your participation. And participation requires noticing what is actually happening inside and around you. You become less reactive, less chaotic, less dependent on external circumstances for stability. You learn to observe your emotions without immediately obeying them. You learn to catch your impulsive thoughts before they turn into impulsive actions. You learn to separate what you feel from what is true, and what is true from what is useful. The more you observe yourself without judgment, the more honest you become. The more honest you become, the more aligned your actions become. And over time, alignment creates a life that feels coherent and meaningful, even without dramatic breakthroughs. You begin removing what drains you, strengthening what matters, and building habits that support the person you're trying to become. The progress is quiet, but it's real. You spend less time escaping and more time engaging, less time doubting and more time doing, less time wishing and more time choosing. The direction of your life is not changed by intensity, but by clarity. The clarity to see yourself accurately, the maturity to accept what you find, and the courage to act on it. When you consistently pay attention to reality, your life becomes less about avoiding problems and more about solving them, less about controlling outcomes and more about improving your processes, less about hoping things will get better and more about making decisions that make better things possible. In the end, the quiet skill that decides the direction of your life is simple: to see clearly, think clearly, and act clearly. Everything else grows from there.